what is the root source of most of our suffering?
Yeah, well, that's obviously a major, beautiful question. And here's the thing, the first noble truth in the Buddhist tradition is the truth of suffering, which really is just truth of dissatisfaction. But this is only in the realm of conventional reality. We only suffer in conventional reality. We suffer because we don't know what's real. We suffer because we don't know who we are. And so as long as we remain, again, this is archetypal non-lucidity, ignorance. The word is fundamentally just ignorance. So if we continue, just to show you how deep this is, if we continue to see the world in a dualistic way, solid, lasting, and independent, very things that we again take to be as given scaffoldings of reality, me in here, you out there, we're going to suffer in direct proportion to that wrong view, to that kind of pathological view. And so we suffer for the principal reason is we suffer because we just don't know. We don't know what's real. We don't know who we are. And because of that, we subscribe, very specifically, we suffer because we subscribe to this ridiculous notion of materialism and duality, which again, for most of the Western world, that's just the way it is. The world is made of matter and it's a materialistic world, and we live in a world of duality. No, we don't. These are constructs. No one has ever experienced matter. Matter is an inference. Matter is just a label we append to the regularity of experience. There's no such thing as matter. So that's an inference. But if we subscribe to that, we suffer. If we subscribe unwittingly to a dualistic world, we suffer. So that's one kind of spiritual dimension. We fundamentally just don't know. Appearance is not in harmony with reality, so we don't know. On a more developmental kind of psychological level, we suffer because of this kind of arrested form of development, this kind of constipated form of development called ego structure. There's nothing inherently wrong with ego, by the way. Ego is a very, very necessary, important stage in human evolution. If we didn't have egoic structure, we wouldn't be here talking about the nature of egoic structure. So we need it in order to survive. We need to separate self and other. We need that for our immune systems to work. Antigen antibody doesn't work without that. So the issue is not this particular stage of human development, but our exclusive identification with it and the lack of recognition that it's an arrested form of development. And so those are the two principal kind of psycho-spiritual reasons why we suffer. We don't know what's real. We don't know who we are. And we suffer, we identify virtually exclusively with form, which is also connected to the materialism thing. So I'll pause there because this is obviously a massive question, but something along those lines is what works for me.
Hmm. Well, so two arguments basically. We don't really know. We are confused about what's real, and we cling to our identification with form. If you said to, let's say, a regular person who's not into Buddhism, your suffering is an illusion, and most of what you consider to be real is an illusion, I'm not sure this is really helpful for them. In a
Well, it
sense,
depends. I need.
because they will swear, and I mean, so can I say, well, my suffering feels very real. My depression feels real, and no matter how I think about it, it's not so easily changeable.
I agree with you 100%. It all depends on how you define illusion. Illusion doesn't mean it's not real. Illusion means appearance is not in harmony with reality, just like in a dream. So if you're, this is why the dream arena is so helpful. If you're in a normal, non-lucid dream, this is a dream when you don't know that you're dreaming. You mistake the contents of your dream to be real. You think there's a dreamer. You think there's a dream world, and you can have nightmares. You can literally scare yourself to death, not metaphorically, literally. And so again, we suffer in the dream because we mistake. We don't know that we're dreaming. We don't know it's all just a manifestation of your mind. Appearance is not in harmony with reality. The monster appears, it seems solid, it seems real, you're scared crapless in there. Well, the minute you become lucid, the minute you realize, wait a second, this is just a dream, this is just my mind, in that moment of lucidity, the tables are immediately turned. The appearance is still there. Whatever's there, the monster, whatever, it's still there. But with lucidity, you see through it now. You have the capacity to see through it. So what you're saying is 100% right. And so what we do is we cultivate what William Blake talked about is this double vision, the capacity to keep one eye on absolute truth and one eye on relative truth. So relative truth is a truth of appearance. You can't deny that. You can't deny the fact that I appear this way. There appears to be something out there. And all the laws of physics and science and whatnot work on this relative conventional reality basis. You can't deny that. That's total classic spiritual bypassing, spiritual materialism. It leads to a host of really serious psychospiritual pathologies. So what you do is like Plato, Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living. You question the appearance. What is the status of this appearance? How real is it really? Well, it's not nearly as real as we think it is. Yes, there's something that appears, but what is the status of that appearance? So you keep one eye on relative truth, otherwise you and I wouldn't be talking, otherwise we couldn't communicate in this world. But then you also develop a new kind of almost X-ray vision that allows you to see the underlying reality behind the appearance. That's the absolute truth. What is it? What is appearance actually made of? What is reality actually made of? And so then you keep your eye on both these truths. And if you do that, I guess that's one way to, excuse me, to talk about what awakening might actually be. The capacity to keep an eye on both relative and absolute, functioning in both worlds. And this allows you to be completely effective in the world at large, to be in the world but not of it. I mean, my understanding is this is part of what the awakening journey is all about. So you can still operate in the world, you can communicate, you can write, you can help. In fact, you do so better than before, but you're no longer subscribing, right? You're no longer falling into the trap of externality, of solidity, of a reified, dualistic, materialistic world, because you have a better, higher view. Literally, Buddhism talks about it as right view. So to me, this is really important. And by the way, parenthetically, if you only have the absolute view, there's a host of problems associated with that. The non-dual traditions that I think are wonderful, but there's blind spots everywhere. You mentioned very briefly that I roll in all these different worlds. Well, I do, because nobody has a patent on truth. And I'll get it wherever I can find it. And so every discipline has its light and its shadows, and the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. So the non-dual traditions can very easily slide into a kind of a non-dual absolutism, which I think is massively topological. Doesn't recognize psychological pathologies, doesn't recognize the ability of working with developmental levels of growth. It puts everything in the absolute basket, and I think that's a massive disservice to the complexity of the human condition. So this is part of the integral approach that I roll with. Why I work with all these different traditions. And even in the spiritual realm, yes, I guess I'm a Tibetan Buddhist, like I mentioned earlier, for tax purposes. But there, Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Shaiva Tantra, Taoism, I mean, Sufism, there's so much wisdom in this world. And I think opening the aperture of our hearts and our awareness to include all these streams, to me, is keeps us open, keeps us humble, and keeps us forever learning. Because the minute we think we've got it all together, and the minute we think we know what's going on, that's the end of our growth. That's the end of our progress. So endless beginner's mind, endless humility. I'm thrilled to have people point out blind spots to me. I love engaging in debate with scientists, philosophers, traditions from others, because we don't see what we don't see by definition. I mean, that's what a blind spot is. So to me, part of waking up is having blind spots pointed out, being willing to have these pointed out, which is not always pleasant, because it means letting go of even not just egoic structure, but all these belief systems that we unconsciously or consciously harbor.